Hello, my name is Shantanu Bhalke, roll number 65 from Division B. Today we will be talking about some of the key components of motherboard including the super input output, floppy connector, ATA connector, 4 SATA connector, system panel connectors and south bridge. Let's start with super input output. This is a chip on the motherboard that handles the input output operations of the computer. It communicates with various peripheral devices such as keyboard, mouse and other controllers. The super input output is responsible for providing support to legacy devices like serial ports, parallel ports and PS2 devices. Next up we have the floppy connector. This is a small rectangular connector on the motherboard that is used to connect floppy disk drives. Floppy disk drives are the pretty much obsolete these days, but the connector is still included on many motherboards for backward compatibility. Moving on, we have the ATA connector. This is another rectangular connector on the motherboard, which is used to connect IDE hard drives and optical drives. IDE drives are also quite outdated now, but same older computers still use them. Now let's talk about the four SATA connections. SATA stands for Serial ATA, and it's a newer and faster way to connect hard drives and optical drives to motherboards. The four SATA connections on the motherboard are typically used for connecting modern hard drives, solid-state drives and Blu-ray drives. Another important component of the motherboard is the system panel connectors. These are small pins that are used to connect the power button, reset button and other front panel connectors to motherboard. These connectors are usually located near the bottom edge of the motherboard and they are labeled with a small text indicating which connector goes where. Finally, we have the south bridge. This is a chip on the motherboard that handles a variety of input-output operations, including controlling the hard drives, USB ports, and other peripheral devices. The south bridge is connected to north bridge, which is responsible for communication between the CPU, memory, and other components. Well, that's all for now. Thank you.
Hi, myself Riddhi Bhandare, roll number 66, Division B, Group 12. So, first of all, I will talk about the inductor. An inductor is a passive electronic component that is made up of a coil of wire. When an electric current flows through the coil, it creates a magnetic field that can store energy. Inductors are often used in electronic circuits to filter out the noise or smooth out the voltage fluctuations. Next is the capacitor. A capacitor is another passive electronic component that is made of two metal plates separated by a non-conducting material. When a voltage is applied to the plates, they store electric charge immediately. Capacitors are often used in electronic circuits to stabilize the voltage, filter out noise, or to store energy. Next is the CPU socket. A CPU socket is a connector on a that is designed to hold and connect the central processing unit CPU of a computer. The socket provides power and data connection to the CPU, allowing it to communicate with other components of the system. Next is the CPU fan connection. A CPU fan connection is a connector on a motherboard that is like the fan that cools the CPU. The fan is typically attached to the heat sink that sits on the top of the CPU, and it helps to dissipate the heat energy that is generated by the CPU during the operation. Next is the script hole. A script hole is a hole in the computer that case or motherboard that is designed to hold a script to secure a component or part. Script holes are often used to attach the motherboard to the case or to secure expansion cards to the motherboard. Next is the four memory sockets. Memory sockets are connectors on the motherboard where memory modules, that is RAM, are installed. The number 4 refers to the total number of sockets on the motherboard that can accommodate the memory modules. The number and type of memory sockets on a motherboard will depend on the specific motherboard's model and chipset. Next is the super input output. Super input output is a chip on the motherboard that controls various input-output functions such as serial and parallel ports, disk drive interfaces, and mouse connectors, keyboards, etc. The super input-output chip is responsible for managing the communication between these devices and rest of the overall system.
Hello, I am Rudra Bhandari from Division B, roll number 67, and I'm here to talk about heat sinks. So in thermodynamics, a heat sink is a heat reservoir which can absorb a arbitrary amount of heat without significantly changing the temperature. So in computers, heat sinks are used to cool GPUs, CPUs, some chipsets, and even RAM modules. So they are made out of aluminum or copper and designed to maximize its surface area in contact with the cooling medium. So next we'll talk about AGP. AGP, or Accelerated Graphics Port, was made by Intel in 1996. It is a direct channel to the CPU, unlike the previous version, which was PCI. So AGP is a parallel expansion card, and it is used for acceleration of 3D computer graphics. So this direct channel to the CPU gave it an advantage over PCI in graphic intensive tasks. And later it was replaced by PCI Express, which was an serial expansion card rather than parallel. Next, we have the 3-pin fan connectors. So the 3-pin connectors are usually used for smaller chassis fans with lower power consumption. They are usually simple white nylon pin receptacle with 3 tin contacts that are typically used in small low power computing products, most notably computer fans. So the fans are needed for cooling purposes, obviously, and the 3 pins are for ground, VCC, and tachometric signal. Next, there comes ATA RAID. ATA, or Advanced Technology Advancement, and RAID, which is Redundant, is a means by which data is distributed over 2 or more physical hard drives to improve performance and increase data safety. So in RAID 1, where the RAID 1 configuration, there are parallel disks which mirror the data in each of them. So the if even if one of the disks fails, we have the data in the disk as well. So next we have the back panel I/O connectors. So we'll take an example for this. So we will take this example of a back panel I/O connector. So the back panel I/O connectors are used for external devices and computers. They include the, as you can see, IEEE 1394, which is a serial bus architecture for high-speed data transfer, and FireWire, which is a serial bus, meaning that information is transferred 1 bit at a time. Then there comes the Mini DV. It is a digital format used for recording, storing, playing, and manipulating media recorded through a camcorder. It is a popular digital format used for video recording and editing. Moving on, the printer port is used for connecting a printer to the computer, obviously. It is a parallel port that is used for transmitting data to a printer. It is a common type of port that is found on most computers and printers. Next, we have a network port. A network port is a software construct that serves as a communication endpoint for a specific process or application. It allows the computer to connect to a network and communicate with other devices on that network. For audio related functions, we have a modem and audio port. The modem port is used for connecting a computer to the internet or other remote networks. This audio port is used for connecting audio devices such as speakers or headphones to the computer. Then SPDIF stands for Sony Philips Digital Interface. It is an optical audio cable format that allows the transfer of data or digital audio signals from one device to another without the need to convert them to an analog signal first. So this is beneficial as analog signal conversion can hurt the audio quality. Then there comes the VGA port, which stands for Video Graphics Array. It is a standard display interface that is used for video output. It is a type of connector that is used for connecting the computer to a monitor or a projector, and it is very common nowadays. Thank you.
Hello guys, I am Tushar Bhandari from B Division, roll number 68. Now we are going to see some of the essential components of the motherboard, including FWH in PLCC, SPDIF, 1394 headers, jumpers, and USB headers. Let's start. FWH in PLCC stands for firmware hub in plastic leaded chip carrier. This component is essentially a type of flash memory that stores system BIOS code. When you turn on your computer, firmware code from FWH initializes hardware and allows operating system to boot up. SPDIF stands for Sony Philips Digital Interface. It is digital audio interface that allows high quality audio to transmitted using either coaxial or optical cables. Stereo and supports a variety of audio formats including stereo and multi-channel surround sound. It can be used to connect to external audio equipment such as speaker amplifier. 1394 headers are also now known as Firewire or iLink. This is a high-speed serial bus interface that allows the transfer of data between devices at high speeds. It is used to connect Firewire devices such as digital cameras, external hard disks, and similar devices. Next we will see jumpers. Jumpers are small connectors on the motherboard that are used to configure various system settings such as clock, speed, voltage and boot options. Jumpers are typically used to configure system settings that are not accessible via BIOS or operating system. And finally, we are going to see USB headers. USB headers stand for Universal Serial Bus Headers, which are used to connect USB devices to the motherboard. USB headers are usually located near edge of motherboard. They can be used to connect internal as well as external USB devices.
My name is Omkar Ajit Bhanji. I am from first year B division, roll number 69. CMOS battery. CMOS stands for complementary metal oxide semiconductor. This device is used to provide power to the CMOS chip, which stores the system settings such as date, time and the BIOS configurations. Without a CMOS battery, your computer won't remember the BIOS settings, and every time you turn it on, you need to reconfigure them. The most common version of a CMOS battery is CR2032. PCI or Peripheral Component Interconnect is a standard interface and a computer bus which is used to connect the expansion cards to a computer's motherboard. The expansion cards such as sound card, graphic card or network cards are connected to a CPU's motherboard using the PCI bus. The PCI bus operates at a frequency of 33 MHz to 133 MHz. But the PCI bus doesn't support the hot swapping. Hot swapping is the ability to remove or replace the expansion card without shutting down the computer. PCI Express, that is Peripheral Component Interconnect Express, is a high-speed serial bus standard used to connect computer components such as graphic card, network adapters and storage devices to the motherboard of a computer. PCI Express was introduced as a replacement to the AGP, that is the Accelerated Graphic Port, and the PCI, that is the Peripheral Component Interconnect. PCI Express uses a point-to-point architecture, meaning that each and every device has a dedicated link to connect to the motherboard. This allows for faster data transfer rates and more efficient use of bandwidth. 24ATX power connector. A 24ATX power connector is a standardized power supply which is used to provide power to the motherboard. It is compatible with different kinds of motherboards and it is a stable and reliable source of power supply. It provides power to the components on the motherboard such as expansion cards, CPU and the memory. This connector consists of 24 pin blocks which are connected to their corresponding ports. It can provide a voltage of 3.3 volts, 5 volts and 12 volts in DC mode. It includes a latch which is helped to keep it secure and in place on the motherboard to avoid the accidental disconnection. SATA RAID. In this term SATA RAID, SATA stands for Serial Advanced Technological Attachment and RAID stands for Reductant Array of Independent Disk. This is a technology used to combine multiple hard drives into a single logical unit for improved performance and reliability. SATA or Serial ATA is a data transfer interface used to connect multiple hard drives to a single computer system. SATA RAID allows multiple hard drives to work together either by stripping data or by mirroring data across multiple hard drives. This technology is essential for high performance storage solutions and provides fault tolerance in the case of single hard drive failure. The most commonly used RAIDs are RAID 0, RAID 1 and RAID 5. Northbridge. is a chipset or group of chipsets which is located on the motherboard of the computer and is responsible for connecting CPU and the high-speed components such as graphic card, PCI Express, memory and the south bridge. The north bridge acts as a bridge between the CPU and the memory controller hub. It controls the flow of data between the CPU and the memory.